Welcome back to Proactive Health. We provide short, informative videos to help you live a healthy life. Do you have a chronic disease? Perhaps this is why. How did we get to a place where 60% of the population has one or more chronic diseases? Where healthy life expectancy is declining year after year? And where 40% of the country is not just overweight but clinically obese? We didn't always have such a high prevalence of chronic illnesses. In the 1930s, the first survey on the topic revealed a prevalence of chronic disease and impairment in adults of about 7.5%. By the year 2000, 45% of all Americans had at least one chronic condition. It's already 60% in 2020, only 20 years later. What does it mean to have a chronic disease? According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, chronic diseases such as heart disease, asthma, cancer, and diabetes are long-term, typically incurable illnesses or disorders. These illnesses are frequently avoidable. Chronic disease rates have been slowly increasing for over a century, but they have increased after the year 2000. Between 2000 and 2010, the percentage of middle-aged persons with several chronic conditions increased by 30%, from 16.1% to 21%. Only 4 years later, in 2014, it had risen to 32.1%. Please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Hit the like button to help us out. Also, check the box below for several guides to healthy living. Now back to our video. Here are the 4 drivers of chronic disease according to the CDC. Tobacco consumption, insufficient physical activity, excessive alcohol consumption, poor nutrition. With chronic disease rates on the rise, we may expect all of the factors that contribute to chronic disease to rise as well. That, however, is not the case. Let's take a look at each of the 4 chronic illness drivers to see what's going on. To begin with, tobacco use. In the last 60 to 70 years, smoking rates have dropped dramatically, from a high of 45% in 1954 to 13.7% today. If smoking is one of the leading causes of chronic disease and smoking rates have dropped by over 70% in the last 66 years, why do chronic disease rates continue to rise? Tobacco use has decreased, yet chronic illness rates continue to rise. Surprisingly, even as fewer individuals smoke, cancer rates are increasing. We'd anticipate cancer rates to fall in lockstep with smoking rates, but that's not the case. While it's frightening to consider what our chronic illness rates would be now if almost half of the population still smoked, there's another adjustment we've made in the previous few decades that is making us worse and sicker. Is it possible that it's due to a lack of physical activity? The CDC suggests that we aim for moderate physical exercise for at least 150 minutes per week. As another factor to chronic disease, is it true that Americans are less active? In 1998, 40.2% of adults in the United States met the recommended levels of physical exercise. In 2018, 54.2% of adults met the requirements, which had been established 20 years before. In other words, even while chronic disease rates have continued to rise, Americans are exercising more today than we were 20 years ago. Although exercise appears to be a key role in illness prevention, it does not appear to be the major driver. While we are exercising more, we are also sitting more as we have shifted from service industries that require physical activity, manufacturing, construction, farming, to desk jobs that involve staying in front of a computer all day during the last several decades. Most people are sedentary during the day with small bursts of aerobic exercise, rather than participating in mild physical activity throughout the day. Excessive alcohol, excessive drinking, and poor diet, according to the CDC, are the final 2 factors that contribute to chronic disease. Let's take a look at how much alcohol has been consumed over the last 56 years. Alcohol consumption continuously grew until 1980, when it began a 40-year drop. Alcohol-related calories have remained relatively constant over the decades, and have even fallen during the 1980s, from 185 daily calories per person in 1980 to 161 daily calories per person in 2017. Excessive alcohol consumption may be unhealthy and contribute to disease, but it's difficult to justify naming it a leading cause of chronic illness when chronic disease rates have risen while alcohol consumption has stayed unchanged. That leaves us with poor nutrition. Poor nutrition is left as the final cause of chronic disease. Is what we consume today better or worse than it was in the past? According to Harvard, we're eating healthier today than we were in the 1990s. According to a recent research, we should observe lower rates of chronic disease and obesity as a result of healthier diets. But unfortunately, we see the opposite. Obesity rates have nearly doubled since 1999, rising from 30.5% in 2000 to 42.4% in 2018. Obesity rates have increased by 40% in the last 2 decades, substantially quadrupling since 1975. If we're exercising more and eating better but still gaining weight, it's possible that our notion of healthy eating is flawed. More high-quality carbs, plant protein, and unsaturated fats may not imply a healthier diet. Instead, consider which foods are most strongly linked to the rise in chronic disease and obesity. Here are the food groups that we're eating about the same amount of, less of, or only slightly more of today compared to 50 years ago, when the rates of chronic disease were less than a third of what they are today, even when smoking was near an all-time high. Animal fats, eggs, dairy, legumes, vegetables, root vegetables like potatoes, nuts, fruit. And here are the nutrient categories that have remained largely unchanged in that same time period between the 1960s and 2017. Sodium, saturated fat, animal foods, cholesterol, dietary fiber, total carbohydrates. On the other hand, here are the top 4 food groups that we consume much more of now than we did 100 years ago. 88 calories per day extra from sugar and sweets. Meat provides an extra 125 calories each day. Grains provide an additional 185 calories each day. Vegetable oils provide an additional 423 calories per day. As you can see, oil from vegetables and seeds has skyrocketed. Seed oil, unlike meat, is a relatively new addition to our diets. Its consumption has never been seen before in human history. In fact, if we go back to 1909, we can find that seed oil consumption in the United States has increased more than 150-fold. Is it possible that seed oil is the main cause of chronic illness? Americans have dutifully followed everything the CDC and USDI have told us to do during our decades-long battle with chronic disease. We're quitting smoking, drinking less alcohol, getting more exercise, eating less saturated fat and sodium, and eating more fruits and vegetables. Despite this, the rates of chronic disease and obesity continue to climb. Throughout this time, seed oil has progressively and quietly crept into our kitchens, restaurants, and packaged meals, currently accounting for 699 calories per day in our diets, or around 20% of what we consume. Is it possible that seed oil is the missing link? If vegetable oil is the hidden cause of today's chronic disease epidemic, it's a simple explanation for why chronic disease and obesity continue to climb despite following public health recommendations. Vegetable oil has largely escaped public attention in terms of illness prevention. Everyone knows that saturated fat and sodium are bad, that we should exercise more, and that smoking cigarettes is bad, but how many people think about their seemingly harmless seed oil consumption? Thanks for watching, and please pay attention to your vegetable oil consumption for the good of your health.